Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, books, and in popular culture. Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is Bruce Markison. As always, I'm joined by co-host and producer Tracy Asteria. Tracy, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good, Bruce. Definitely looking forward to tonight's guest. How have you been?
Not doing too bad. Not doing too bad. As I was telling you a moment ago, my wife is getting ready to take a trip to visit our daughter in Wales. My daughter Madeline is studying abroad at Cardiff University, so they'll be reunited there, and I'll be by myself back here.
That is so exciting for her, though.
Yeah.
That'll be really great. Hopefully the weather cooperates over there, but what an experience, a chance in a lifetime.
Yeah, I was in Europe back in 1986. It was my junior year in college, and I spent the spring semester at a very small place called Roxton College, a couple of hours north of London. It's a wonderful experience, and I think my daughter is having a good time as well, and a very good experience too. So we're
Awesome.
pleased about that. All right, we are going to get right to our guest this week, Tracy, because the guest on this edition of the Ghostly Gallery is a good friend of ours, award-winning author Frank Dello Stritto. Frank has written 8 books, including books on both the history of horror and his own horror novels. He's a 2-time winner of the Rondo Award and a member of the Rondo Monster Kid Hall of Fame, which is really a prestigious honor. Frank has been nominated for several Rondos here in 2026. We'll talk about those in a moment. But right now, let's welcome back to the Ghostly Gallery, Frank Dello Stritto. Frank, how are you?
I'm doing fine, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing well, too.
Very good. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Frank. We first met at Monster Bash probably 6-7 years ago. I went to see one of the talks that you did, and you'll be speaking there again. We'll hear a bit about that later on. But you have been nominated for no fewer than 3 Rondo nominations here in 2026. The voting is ongoing right now. People can vote at Rondo-award.com. And the deadline is May 1st, so still a few weeks to go. And if you like Frank's stuff, and why wouldn't you, definitely think about voting for Frank at Rondo-award.com. One of the nominations is in the category of Best Classic Monster Fiction. His book deals with the devil, dialogues with death. This is Frank's most recent book. It's about a young man who's dying. He's seemingly at the gates of heaven, but is offered eternal life, youth, and health by the devil himself. Then Frank is also nominated for Best Event of 2025. This was a program called Murders Double Down. Frank and fellow historian Greg Mank offer separate lectures on the Bela Lugosi film Murders in the Rue Morgue at the 2025 Monster Bash. Frank did that in person. Greg actually did it virtually, but they covered different aspects of the movie, provided a lot of insight into a film that features a terrific effort by Bela Lugosi. And then Best Article, another category Frank is nominated in, the article called Horror's Greatest Showman, The Fun and Frights of William Castle. And this is in Scary Monsters magazine. From Emergo to the punishment pole and beyond, the article details all of the gimmicks and all of the horror films from the creative mind of William Castle. I get this magazine, and I got this one a little bit late, but I so enjoyed the article that really kind of motivated me to send Frank a note about it. And then from there, asked him about coming on the show, and he's graciously agreed to do so. So we're going to spend a lot of our time with Frank talking about this particular article. So Frank, I first learned about William Castle not that long ago. It was maybe 20, 25 years ago. And I'll be honest, I didn't think much of him as a filmmaker at first. Seemed like a B-movie director. He made films that weren't very consequential. None of them, well, I shouldn't say none of them, but most of them didn't receive particularly strong reviews, favorable reviews. But then the more I've learned about him and the more I've seen his films, and now reading the article that you did, I really have a much different appreciation for him. This was a creative mind who seemed to love horror, enjoyed putting together gimmicks to promote his films, and really he made some very decent and entertaining movies on relatively small budgets. So I want to ask you right off the bat here, Frank, was I right about him on first impression, or am I right about him now?
Well, I think you're right on both of them. The,
Okay.
First, before I forget, let me say William Castle, for me and for many of my generation, was the first director we could name. I mean, I had favorite movies, Seven Voyages, Sinbad, Wizard of Oz. If you ask me who directed these, I said, I don't know. But we knew William Castle because he either introduced his films in the coming attractions or he appeared in the films, something in the introduction telling you what you're about to see. So we knew the name William Castle before we knew any other director. The only other director I could name was Alfred Hitchcock, but at the time, to me, he was a host of a TV show. I didn't know he directed movies until much later. So, if you watch, there's an excellent documentary on William Castle called Spine Tingler, and it's about his career. And a number of the guest speakers in there say this was the director we knew when we were kids. So some William Castle, memorable horror movies, independently, low budget. He made some memorable movies in his first years with Columbia when he was definitely a B director. When it was one of his goals in life was to break out of the B runs and climb and make A pictures, which he really never did. He was the producer of Rosemary's Baby, but he wasn't the director. And so, yes, I think he made some unforgettable films. I think he made some forgettable films, but we like to judge people by their best and not their worst.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think at his best, there's a lot here for horror fans like you and me and Tracy. In your article, Frank, for Scary Monsters, you make an important point about Castle. He did not start his film career making horror movies. I guess they were more dramatic films, straight drama early, but then he came to horror later. Why did he make that switch?
Okay, well, he came to Hollywood at age 23, a tender age, and he basically worked from the bottom up. He was his title was he had various titles in different movies, but his title was dialogue director, which he describes as basically doing whatever was needed to get the production rolling, and otherwise to keep out of sight. So it wasn't, he didn't see that as a prestigious job. He was 29 when he directed his first film, and he was definitely a B movie director. Now, the younger generations don't really know what a B movie was. These were movies that would go along with a double feature. So there'd be an A movie and then there'd be a B movie. And in those days, you didn't have to leave a theater after the movie was over. You could stay all day. And that's two movies they called chasers. That meant that people would go to see the good movie, and then the bad movie would kind of make them leave out a book. Castle was very good at that. He had a talent for staying in schedule and on budget, which is crucial for B directors. And he also got some of his own personality into it. If you go to YouTube and you put in William Castle movies, you'll see some of the titles we'll be talking about later today. But you see a lot of his films in the 1940s. He directed some of the Whistler series. Whistler was the detective series. Very stylish. And he said you put the money in front of the camera, not behind it. So he was very good at making his movies look like they cost more than they did. And he had a personal style to them. And as I said, he worked from the ground up, so he knew all parts of it. When the 1950s come along, Wells was born in Worcester. They worked together for a while. But William Castle was, when 1950 came, he was 36, and that's when the studio system started collapsing. They no longer ran the entertainment world. And so he struggled along in the early 50s, did some television work. And then he put everything on the line. He hopped his house. He borrowed what money he could, and he made a film called Macabre, or Macabre, however you want to pronounce it. And that was his first. That was his first horror film, and that was that 1958. So he was then 44 when he made his first horror film, and then it was and to publicize it, he had a he, so homicidal had an insurance policy. Anybody that died of fright during the movie would get $1,000 from Lloyd's of London. But not if you were killed by anybody, not if you had a pre-existing condition, and not if you committed suicide. You have to die of the Macabre is a great movie. It was certainly watchable. And I don't think anybody guesses the ending. I'll give him credit for that. You didn't see it coming. But I don't think anybody died of fright, because it's definitely not a frightening film. But it's fun. And in there, it's the story of a father finding out his daughter has been kidnapped and she has been buried in a coffin. And he only has so many hours to find her before she dies. And that's the and weird things that happen along the way. You have a complicated side plot. People having affairs with each other, people each other, et cetera, et cetera. And but then it finally gets down to it. And then I gotta say, I didn't see the end coming. It's not a great movie, but it's certainly, and the publicity gag. I was 8 years old when it came out. I couldn't tell you the name of the movie, but I knew there was a movie out there that would give you $1,000 if you died of fright during the and nothing like that had been tried before. So it certainly got more PR than it probably deserved, because no one's ever done this before. So with the success of that, he was off and running. And over the next 6 years or so, when we think of William Castle films, we tend to think of the film he made over the next 6 years. But at the end of the movie, a skeleton arises from this pit and pushes the woman who we found out is the villainess into it. And as that happened, the gimmick of Emergo, going into action, where a skeleton emerged from the screen and swooped over the audience. Now, I saw this in suburban New Jersey. You didn't have any Emergo. There was nothing coming out of the screen. They needed props and hooks and pulleys and all that to make that work. And the Lincoln Theater in Kearney, New Jersey, was not going to do this. so I just saw it straight up. But I got to say, I remember that day. It was I guess I was 8 or 9 at the time. That was a unforgettable afternoon, and had some unforgettable moments. Elijah Cook Jr., who was a great character actor. Those who don't know his name will recognize his face. He gives the prologue and the epilogue, and he is terrifying. As soon as he's done, Vincent Price comes in. So you're off and running. And there's one scene where the heroine turns around and sees this grotesque woman, and we all jumped out of our seats. That was one of the great stories of going life.
So, all right, Frank, let's stick with House on Haunted Hill for a moment, because I want to get a little more in depth. This might be his most famous film, so best. So you do have Vincent Price. He's in the lead. He plays a guy named Frederick Lauren, an eccentric millionaire who invites 5 strangers, all pretty desperately in need of money, to spend the night in a house known for murder and hauntings. And if they can survive the night, each stranger wins $10,000. Pretty big money back then, especially. And to me, this is just about the perfect character, the perfect role for Vincent Price, as far as creepiness and campiness. I mean, you start thinking about Vincent Price roles, this is one of the first that comes to mind, right?
Yes, and I don't know if Vincent Price would appreciate me saying this, but I think that's his best performance. I mean, he was in some serious stuff. He was in some serious stuff in the 40s and 50s. He, of course, was Roger Corman's recurring star in the Poe horror films they made together. But if you say, my opinion, his best performance, maybe his best movie, is House on Haunted Hill.
Yeah. As you mentioned, it's a film that has a number of jump scares. You mentioned that eerie woman who glides along the ground. There's that moving skeleton that also talks near the end. There's a boiling vat of acid. There's even a ghostly figure that appears in a window. Pretty good special effects. Now, in today's horror market, I think all of this stuff would be fairly mild. But I have to imagine that back in the late 1950s, this had to be quite frightening for that time period.
I got to say, except for the grotesque woman, seeing her suddenly, we weren't scared. We were having a ball. The
Okay.
kids really enjoyed it. So was anybody scared? I don't know. I think the next movie we'll be talking about will be The Tingler. I think that was scarier in its own way. But no, I wasn't scared by that. I was scared by that woman. In addition to the ones you rattled off, there's also a ceiling that drips blood. There's a chandelier falling on people, and every gimmick he could think of was there. And I got to say, when I think back, I think I was enthralled. That's just the way to put it. I had never seen a movie like that. And let me make an aside here. When you say Saturday matinee to my generation, it means one thing. When you say it today, it means something else. When I was a kid, Saturday matinees were on Saturday afternoons. They played whatever movie they could get for the price, and the audience was overwhelmingly preteen boys. I mean, I would see half my classmates there. And I mean, my Saturday matinee days were 8 to 12, and those days are gone. I mean, now when you say Saturday matinee, could be any movie that's playing anywhere, playing at that time. But the in the suburbs of New Jersey, and I imagine the smaller towns everywhere, the main attractions, the big movies of the day, only played at night on the weekends, and during the day, the theater was basically handed over to the kids. It was our private domain. So you might go to the movie alone, but you wouldn't be sitting alone. You were often you'd see boys there you knew. And again, it wasn't just boys, but it was overwhelmingly preteen boys, at least in my neighborhood. And we loved these movies. So scared, no. Tell you the truth, that was when I was going to my Saturday matinee years. Some of the previews would scare me more than the movies. The previews could be really terrifying, and I think one or two I avoided because I was so scared by the coming attraction. I saw them years later on television. I go, well, the preview was better than this. So.
Oh my gosh. It's funny when you talk about the Saturday matinees. I remember my dad would tell me stories and my grandfather about going to these Saturday matinees when they were kids. And you're definitely right. Like today, the Saturday matinees, it could be whatever the big blockbuster is at the moment, like Super Mario or whatever. But that's what the kids would go to. But I remember the stories that my dad used to tell. So that was pretty awesome. You had touched on some of the theater stunts that William Castle had used, like you touched on Emergo. And I didn't know anything about that until Bruce did one of our episodes of This Week in Horror when he talked about it. And I find that really quite fascinating, just kind of a movie director would kind of do physical stunts with the audience. Now, you mentioned that they didn't do that in the theater that you saw this film in, but did you see any other ones when you were kind of growing up as a kid, like physical stunts like that?
The answer is no. Again, if you look at my generation with children, there were the big theaters, cities, and then there were the neighborhood theaters. There were no malls with screen cinemas. There were you didn't drive to a place. These were modest little theaters. Some of them predated the movies. Had been stage theaters that became movie theaters.
Mm-hmm.
So they had no mechanisms for this kind of stuff.
Right.
Getting to it a little later, but there was only one gimmick that I actually witnessed. It wasn't a physical gimmick with anything happening in the theater. It was something handed out as a link.
Awesome. Thank you.
What did they hand out to you? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, 13 Ghosts. 13 Ghosts. Let me say that the canon of Castle of House on Haunted Hill, The Tingler, and 13 Ghosts. And 13 Ghosts is a ghost story. It's about this happily married couple that are with two kids that are down and out financially, and they inherit basically a haunted house, and they have to move in because they don't have much choice. And the gimmick in there was the ghost viewer.
Mm.
They film the movie and they superimposed on it in what is it in? I'm going to get this wrong, but they superimposed on it in red filters, ghosts.
Right. Yeah.
They handed you a ghost filter, and it had it was a two pieces of cellophane and cardboard. And if you look through the red one, the ghosts would go away. You look through the blue one, they were highlighted, or maybe it's the other way around. And as I said in my article, I was just a little kid there. I was 10 years old. And the first time the ghosts come on, you look through it so you can see them. And then you'd shift to see if they really did go away. And I'd be doing that through the movie. And then later in the movie, I folded it in half so I could look through both pieces of cellophane at once and see if anything happened. And not knowing I was what today is a valuable collector's item. But it didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ghost viewer didn't make it home that day. And when I watched the documentaries on William Castle, these guys bringing out these pristine condition ghost viewers, I think, wow, I got mine.
Yeah. I can't imagine many of those ghost viewers made it out of the theater once the movie was done. Back then, people did not maintain a lot of those things. They didn't collect them like with baseball cards. You played with them and then your mother threw them out, or you threw them out, or you put them in bicycle spokes and they got damaged. And I imagine with a lot of these mementos at the theater, the same fate came upon them. Frank, I did want to ask one more question on House on Haunted Hill. And this is a question I've never been able to resolve. I've seen this movie probably 4 or 5 times now. Is this a straight murder mystery, or is it really a story of the supernatural? Because when the movie starts, the Elijah Cook character, Watson Pritchard, the owner of the house, is going on about it's haunted. It's the only real haunted house in the world. And some of the things that happen make you think that haunting supernatural events are occurring. And you have also the appearance of Carol Omart's character, ghostly appearance in the window. And then there's a rope that extends from the window to one of the other female characters, and the rope is moving by itself, and it's going around that character's feet. And it seems very supernatural to me. But then as the movie goes on, we start to realize Vincent Price is behind a lot of this stuff. He's orchestrating it. So I'm not really sure. Is this a murder mystery, or is it a supernatural ghost story? Do we know?
Well, we wouldn't know unless Castle told us, but for my money, there's nothing, when it's all said and done, it was all a plot. It was a cat and mouse game between Vincent Price and his wife, both of whom despise each other, by the way. Now,
Yeah.
here's how they did some of the tricks on each other. As far as that rope that moves on its own and wraps itself around that woman's feet, how did they do that? I don't know, but I don't think it was supernatural. I think it was all part of a plot between Price and his wife. And,
Okay.
and just to make a point, I don't think Price was doing much of that until the very end. It was all her wife and his lover. We're blowing the whole plot here. So if you haven't seen the movie, you're going to hate me for this. His wife and her lover were having all these tricks come into it. And
Yeah.
so, no, I don't think it was supernatural.
All right. I'll go with that. All right, let's talk about a movie you touched upon for just a moment. It also came out in 1959, but in the summer, and it's a movie called The Tingler. So here we have another starring role for Vincent Price. It's a very different kind of movie, though. He plays Dr. Warren Chapin, who develops a theory that every human being has a parasite within their body. And if we scream when we are frightened, then this parasite, this so-called tingler, which looks pretty horrible as it's presented in the movie, that tingler is kept under control. But if for whatever reason we're not able to scream, this tingler grows in size and it kind of grows out of control, becomes powerful enough to kill us. And when I first saw this movie, I'm thinking, man, this is creative. How does someone come up with something as wild as this? I mean, it's amazing to me.
Yeah, how they came up with it, I have no idea. Just to elaborate a bit on what you said, Vincent Price's character, in addition to other things, does the autopsies on for the county. In this particular county, seems a lot of men dying in the electric chair, and when you're in the electric chair, you're gagged, you can't scream. So, and Vincent Price notices that all these men have their spines cracked, and he doesn't know what it is. And it turns out he's discovered the thing that when you're frightened, it comes out of your spine, grows in size, and if you scream, it goes away. And if you watch the Tingler, the first thing you'll see is a cascade of heads coming off through the screen, screaming bloody murder. And I did not see this as a boy because I think the Lincoln Theater, it was a pushback on some of the movies they were showing on Saturday afternoons to the kids. You know, it didn't take too many kids home saying they were scared for them to get a little pressure on them. So I didn't see this till years later, and I've never seen it in a theater. And it's a movie you should see in a theater because in the movie it takes place in a theater. So there's people movie in the theater, and within the movie there's people watching the movie, and then you're watching the movie. And the tingler gets loose, and Vincent Price comes on, and it's just a scream, and the whole theater goes dark, both in the movie and but on television, when the screen goes dark, it actually glows. So you kind of lose the effect. And I would say, if anything scared me in a William Castle movie, the end scene when the scream being frightened to death by her husband, and that's really, they really go overboard. There's this ghoulish creature chasing her. His hand comes from behind her. This hairy hand with a hatchet goes after her. Moves into the bathroom, and all of a sudden, the black and white stone goes color, and out of the blood red bath water comes this hand drenched in for her, and that's when all she can take, and that's her tingler there.
Yeah, and that's the one scene where you do see color. Other than that, it is a black and white film. Now, Frank, this movie opened to pretty mixed reviews back in '59. And then over the years, it seems to have gained more favor. I'm curious, where do you stand on this one?
I love it. Here's the Wells for the not Wells because it'd be Castle. The House on Haunted Hill, the Tingler, and 13 Ghosts are over the top stories played seriously. They're not played for laughs. I don't think they'd work if they were played for laughs. The characters in it, there's really no comic relief in any of the films. They're played deadly seriously, but they're so over the top that the viewer can either go with the flow or he can rise above it, and so and you know, look at, yeah, is it silly? Yeah. Is it scary? Yeah. You can go either way, and I think that's why these are the three films of his that stick out. As far as the critical opinion, you and I both write books, right? And there are people who act and talk normally, but once you tell them they're a book reviewer, they start talking in these senatorial tones and invoking all this high power stuff, which is why I don't pay much attention to reviews of my books. and so it is with some. You know, you're a reviewer for the New York Times in 1959, 1960. You can't really come on and say this is a great movie. Go see it. They're gonna have to take the high road, right? Now, you know, 60 years later, we look back and say, hey, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. We had fun there. So I think that's what's going on now.
Now, they used a gimmick in this film called Percepto. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Percepto. Well, again, I didn't get to experience this firsthand in suburban New Jersey.
Mhm.
Castle. Okay, in the key scene in the movie is the Tingler gets loose inside a theater, and and Vincent Price's voice comes on and says, "Scream, scream for your lives!" And what Castle did was he would put buzzers or vibrators under some seats, not all of them, and people would they'd feel a spark, they'd feel a jolt, and they'd jump up and all that, and they, you know, and I didn't witness this, whether there were any actually frightened people or people were just having the time of their lives with this. It could go either way, but that was Percepto. I never
Wow.
I never experienced Percepto. If you watch the documentary Spine Tingler, not too long ago, a theater reran Tingler and put buzzers all over the place, and people loved it. There were lines out the door, and I guess if you knew it was coming, you would do it. And before I forget, there's a movie made not too long ago called Matinee, starring John Goodman, and John Goodman's character is basically William Castle, and he's doing something like that on his latest movie, Mant, half man, half ant. And there's a scene, not to be indelicate, there's a scene where a nurse bends over and Mant comes and grabs her right in the behind with this big ant claw. And that's when the buzzers go off and everybody jumps out of their seat. So that's vintage Castle. Though Mant is not a Castle film, it's Lawrence Woolsey is John Goodman's character. So that's his gimmick. That was a homage to Castle and his gimmicks.
Oh, wow. Oh, that sounds so cool. Do you think in today's horror fans and today's genre, do you think something like that would go over well with audiences today, or would that just be like too pricey, too corny, or do you think it's pretty cool?
Uh, Today's audiences are basically young enough to be like grandchildren. it's, it's hard for me to speak on their behalf. If they got into it, yeah. I mean, if they, I don't know. I don't think my current generation would go for it all that well. If the kids get into it, maybe you'd have to get some kid on here and ask him or have him experience it. They might get into it. I don't know. But you allude to what it is. But Castle's salad days in this didn't last that long.
Mhm.
His gimmicks were seen as getting quite corny from the early '60s, and I mean, as the films went on, the gimmicks got less and less intrusive.
Mm.
There was a homicidal. What it's typical of a plate ring. At the end of near the end of the movie, just as the whole thing is supposed to on, Kensel himself comes on because if you're too scared, you can go now and get your money. See the end of the movie, and as I said earlier, back in the '60s, you didn't have to leave a theater when the movie was over. You could stay and watch it all day.
Mhm.
I did that once or twice in my career, mainly for movies I was white out. I didn't want to pay free admission, so I just stayed there all day and see the same movie 3 times and take notes. What Castle found out is people were watching the whole movie, and they'd sit through the second one, and during the flight, the money back.
Yeah.
He put an end to that by setting up a coward's corner that you wanted your money back, you had to go stand in the corner, which was all yellow. It said coward's corner, and you had to wait there while the next game basically seeing you were a coward.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's how they control that.
I think if they were going to do something like this in theaters today, they'd have to incorporate cell phones in some way because so many people are on their phones, even during the movies, even in a darkened theater. So if they could do something and it's where you have to check your phone or look something up on your phone, which wouldn't work for me because I may be the last American not to have a cell phone, believe it or not. I'm just resistant to the whole idea. We could do a whole episode on that. But most Americans like their cell phones, kids, adults. And I think if they could make the cell phone part of the gimmick, part of the promotional stunt, I think it might work.
Well, Castle almost did that. There's a
Really?
1965 film he made called "I Saw What You Did," and again,
Mm.
this will go back to people my age can relate to this. There was a time when you could make a phone call, nobody knew who you were. There was no way to see their number. There was no caller ID. You picked up the phone, you had no idea who or where it was coming from, and there was a big surge of crank calls. People would call up and you know ask ridiculous things of someone, and then it was all a joke. They'd hang up. And I
Yeah.
saw, and the movie's called "I Saw What You Did" in 1965. Some teenage girls call up a number at random out of the phone book and say, "I saw what you did, and I know who you are." But turns out the man they call just murdered his wife. this this starts the whole plot run. And as a gimmick, Castle wanted to hand out plastic phones to people as they came in. That was and and he did that. I don't know if he ever did it, but I understand he did it for a little while until the phone company stepped in. He said, "This has got to stop. You are
Really?
encouraged to make these crank calls." So he stopped that, and he he came up with some other gimmick. In some theaters, they had what they call the shock seats, where he put people in there with seatbelts so they wouldn't be scared out of their seats. But he almost got the phones in there. By the way, you're the last man I'll have a cell phone. I'm existed for a long, but I kept trying to log into these places and said, "Well, they're sending a message to your phone to make sure we know who you are," and that got to be awfully cumbersome. So I had to get a cell phone. So what
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah, there's things like that. They're putting pressure on me. Maybe I'll cave in at some point. That's fascinating. I did not know that about Castle and that phone gimmick. Let's talk about another film that you've mentioned as being one of your favorites, Frank. It is 13 Ghosts, the original made in 1960. So it's a film about a man named Cyrus Zorba. Great name. Him and his family, they're broke. They have absolutely no money. So they suddenly inherit a large house free of mortgage, free of rent from Cyrus's uncle. And they think, well, this is a great opportunity. We will save a lot of money. It's a pretty big house. Everybody will fit into it. The problem is the house is reputed to be haunted, and it's haunted by at least 12 ghosts who apparently have been collected by Zorba's uncle. He collected ghosts. Here's the rub, though. Zorba cannot ever sell the house. He and his family must stay in it, or else they will lose it completely and receive no financial compensation in return. So you've said you really like this one. What is it about 13 Ghosts that grabs you?
It's audacity. I mean, it's you watch it now, and it is a bit over the top. The uncle's name, by the way, is Plato Zorba, another great name. The Zorbas have great
Plato.
names for their
Yeah.
for their and by coincidence, not too long after that, uh, the medical show Ben Casey came on with Dr. Zorba. And when I first watched it, I was wondering if he was related to the Zorbas of the 13 Ghosts, but he wasn't, apparently. Okay. And well, let me say this: of the three, what I consider the three great monster horror movies by Castle, House on Haunted Hill, The Tingler, and 13 Ghosts. I think 13 Ghosts comes in third, but I enjoy the movie. I could watch it over and over. It's and it just goes. It's shameless in its overstatement. You have these crazy ghosts doing ridiculous things, ruining the
Yeah.
kitchen and all that. And one ghost is a lion tamer who had his head bitten off by the lion. So both he and the ghost of the lion and his headless body are wandering around. And if that weren't enough, Castle gives a good part to Margaret Hamilton, who played the Wicked Witch of the West in Wizard of Oz, and she's
Yes.
not quite a witch, but she has a séance, and she's really hamming it up there, playing on her old role. So it's a fun movie. If you need a fun movie that you can laugh at, laugh with, whatever, it's the way to go.
I think that's my favorite part of the movie is Margaret Hamilton's performance. So she plays this caretaker who is also a medium. Her name is Elaine Zacharides. She looks frightful. It is somewhat reminiscent of what she did 21 years earlier as the Wicked Witch of the West. Not that she has green skin or anything like that, not that she's necessarily a witch, but it is a very frightening appearance. And I think it makes the film in my mind.
Yeah, I I I wouldn't go that far, but she's certainly a great component of the movie. It's a black and white movie, so her skin may well be green. We don't know.
Yeah. Another good actor is Martin Milner, who's in the film. And without giving up too much here, normally he's known for good guy roles, and he's not so good here.
No, he's the boy next door. I mean, Route 66, Adam 12, and if you're as old as me, remember him as the boyfriend of Chester A. Riley in Life of Riley. He was always he has one Twilight Zone episode where he's up front and likable and lovable as ever. But in this movie, first of all, he's a lawyer, and he's kind of making things a bit ominous, and yes, no, without giving away the movie, he's not the best person to have around. And I think,
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. You mentioned the Twilight Zone. I think you're referencing the episode, which is one of my favorite, called Mirror Image. And it's the actress from Psycho and Vera Miles.
Yeah.
And she's at the bus station in upstate New York. And the episode references all these towns in upstate New York because that's where Rod Serling grew up. He was born in Syracuse, basically grew up in the Binghamton area. There's now a statue in his honor. There's the Rod Serling Convention, which takes place every fall. It's at the theater in Binghamton. And in that film, Martin Milner's character kind of befriends Vera Miles when she starts to see her doppelganger, her double. And the double is hanging around this desolate bus station, kind of staring at her, very intimidating. And Martin Milner actually tries to help her out. So he's even in that. Yeah, he's a good character, but not so much in this particular film. So this is one. I had no idea this was one of your favorites from Castle, 13 Ghosts. Just out of curiosity, did you ever see the remake?
I have tried to watch the remake of 13 Ghosts, and I've tried to watch the remake of House on Haunted Hill. They have budgets that William Castle would have drooled over, and yeah. I don't think either one is. I don't think either one is worth an hour and a half of my time. I've never watched them through. I hate saying this because I know I sound like an old fogey, so we don't make them like this anymore. And they do make good movies anymore, but these were not good movies.
Yeah. Well, I definitely agree with you on the remake of 13 Ghosts. I've had trouble getting through that as well. It's very violent, very gory. It's nothing like the original. I found it a distasteful film, to be quite honest. So if people want to say I'm, old fogey and talking about how films were better back then, I do like a lot of the movies today. I think we're in a glorious era of horror. But you look at the films of the 21st century, I don't think 13 Ghosts remake is a particularly good one. Frank, let's move on to another film. And this is one I sense you're probably not as high on it as I am. Came out in 1961, called Mr. Sardonicus. And this is a really serious film. It begins with a successful physician, Sir Robert, who is summoned by his former love interest and asked to visit the castle of Baron Sardonicus. What a name. Years earlier, the Baron robbed his father's grave in order to secure a winning lottery ticket. But in so doing, he paid a heavy price. The Baron's face became frozen in a horrible grin, so horrible that he is forced to wear a mask most of the time. I really like this one, Frank. It builds suspense. We become very curious as to what Sardonicus looks like underneath the mask, and then it's finally revealed. Do you remember how you reacted when you first saw this one?
Yes, and I agree with everything you said, but I have one gripe. I wish they had gotten a better makeup man for the for the Sardonicus face. It's a little too. This is not a movie to be taken lightly. It's like, as you said, it's serious. It takes its horror straight, and I would have liked a more realistic looking satanic grin, like the Joker, or some of the characters from, I forget the name of the late silent movie, but where there is a grin plastered on his face, and this one is a bit over the top. But yes, it's a very serious movie, and I think that's why I don't put it in the canon of the top 3 movies, because there's no two ways to look at this. This is serious going, and there are some ugly things going on there. That Mr. Sardonicus seems to get his jollies by hiring village girls for the night and then taking off his mask and scaring the hell out of them. And there's torture in there, and Sardonicus is, before the movie starts, has taken out the eye of his servant, and he's threatening to do the same to his wife. And I said in my article you referred to, why did that woman ever marry him? She didn't marry him for his looks. We know that. So,
yeah.
And that had a gimmick, by the way, the punishment pole. At the end, near the end of the movie, the young lovers are getting away, and Sardonicus is in his home, and William Castle comes on screen, and he says he's taking a poll. He goes, should we let Mr. Sardonicus get off easy, or should we make him suffer as he deserves to? And he counts the votes from the audience and all that, and he says, well, he's getting the punishment. That's the way it goes. And Will Castle always claimed he filmed 2 endings in case the poll came out different. But I don't really think he ever took a poll. Well, first of all, he knew that there was almost no chance people didn't want to see this villain to get what he richly deserves. And then it goes back to there. We see Sardonicus, basically, as I recall, basically his mouth is frozen and he can't eat, and that's going to be a slow, ugly death for him.
Yeah. So when you first saw his face, you were disappointed?
I thought it was over the top in a movie that didn't want to be over the top. It's a much more, after 13 Ghosts, one by one, Castle's film become more grounded. They're more serious. They're not easy to take lightly. And so I would have liked a better makeup job on Mr. Sardonicus's face.
Yeah. You must remember the scene where it's fairly early in the movie. His servant, Krull, wonderful performance by Oscar Homolka, I believe is his name. Krull brings to Sardonicus's room this just awful dish of some liquid-type dinner. And then all we hear is Sardonicus slurping it because he's not able to chew real food. I saw this again the other night, and when I saw that scene and heard that slurping, that went through my bones.
Okay. Well, to me, it has an air of nostalgia because the little rascals always seem to get mush for dinner when they were in the orphanage. And it looked just like Little Rascals mush.
Yeah.
Which is, by the way, is a fate worse than death if you have to eat that. So yes. I could appreciate Sardonicus's ill humor.
It's interesting, Frank. This is a film that's not favored by critics. It didn't receive good reviews at the time. It really hasn't received good reviews for the most part since then. I mean, its IMDb rating is pretty low. I think it's right up there with House on Haunted Hill, maybe better in some ways, but I guess my opinion is in the minority.
I'm afraid to say it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's well, the proof of the pudding is that House on Haunted Hill is readily available all the time. I mean, it's on TV a lot. Mr. Sardonicus is not that easy to find. I don't think there's that demand for it.
Yeah, that's a good point. One other film I want to go in depth on is a 1964 film from William Castle called Straight Jacket. And it stars a great actress, Joan Crawford, in the role of Lucy Harbin. She murdered her husband and his lover 20 years earlier, but has now been released from a psychiatric hospital. And then as soon as she's released, a series of axe murders follows. And that, of course, puts Lucy in the crosshairs of suspicion once again. I think this is another good effort from Castle. First off, what did you think of Crawford's performance as Lucy?
Oh, she was fine. Before I forget, this may be the last real gimmick that Castle had. He gave out cardboard axes with fake blood stains on them to people that came. Again, we didn't get that in suburban New Jersey, but in New York City, you could go home with a cardboard axe with blood on it. Well, she's fine in the movie. When you read the behind the scenes, she was a former MGM star. She was an Oscar winner, and she expected to be treated like one. So she made things kind of difficult for people behind the scenes. The initial actress that had the Diane Baker role, which is Joanne Crawford's character's daughter, Crawford had her fired and replaced with Diane Baker. And personally, I don't like to know too much about behind the scenes because it kind of colors what I see when I look on screen. But no, she was fine in the movie. She handles her scenes well. She was a good actress. She is in a role that fits her. And I gotta say, as a kid, I mean, this is before this movie was made. When her movies would come on TV, my mother would put them on. I always felt uncomfortable watching her. And when that book came out by her daughter, I said, "Yeah, maybe I'm sensing that." So that feeling probably augments my appreciation of her performance here, because I felt a little. I still feel a little uncomfortable looking at her. Like I said, I'd rather not know too much behind the scenes because it colors what I see on the screen. But she's fine, and the final scene she was not in as scripted, and being the former MGM star, Oscar winner, all that, she made herself the center of attention in the final screen. Again, I'd rather not know these things. It doesn't help my appreciation of the movie. But no, she's fine in it. And Diane Baker.
Yeah, every time I see a Joan Crawford film, all I can think of are two things. Number one, her ranting about no wire hangers allowed in the house and scrubbing the bathroom floor at 3 a.m. That's Mommy Dearest. We ought to do a show on that. We ought to do one on Mommy Dearest, Tracy. It's a wild film. I don't know how much of it's accurate. I'm sure some of it's exaggerated, but those are the two things I think about with Joan Crawford.
I agree too. That was the very first novel that I think I read in junior high was Mommy Dearest. And that was like a horror novel to me. It sent chills, some of those things that I read in that book.
I had totally forgotten this, but let me interject it here. My aunt was Joan Crawford's masseuse, and knew Joan Crawford well. And my aunt, who was she became my aunt by marriage. My uncle was her second husband. She had a child by her first husband, and that child got sick, and Joan Crawford footed the bills for the hospital. And
Really?
and my aunt thought the world of Joan Crawford. And when Joan Crawford adopted the children, I think the one that wrote the book and her brother were both adopted children.
Mm-hmm.
Called my aunt and said, "Can you come over and help me? There's no one here. The kids just arrived. It wasn't expected." My aunt thought the world of her. And my aunt is long gone now, but in the 1970s or so, when they was doing work on Joan Crawford's biography, she would get called, and she'd always refuse to talk to them because she thought they were looking for dirt. But she thought the world of Joan Crawford. So there's at least two sides to all of us. Again, I don't know how much is true, but my aunt Charlotte would not agree with a word of it.
Interesting.
Oh, wow. So the movie Straitjacket, the script, it comes from the great writer Robert Bloch, but the film only received mixed reviews. What was your opinion on the movie? Did you like it? Did you love it?
I'm not surprised it got mixed reviews because it's not the kind that reviewers would cotton to.
Mm-hmm.
And did I like it? Yes, I did. The weakness of the film is you suspect very early on that these axe murders are not being done by Joan Crawford. So who's left to do them, right? So The ending is not really the surprise you'd like it to be, because you say it can't be her. What kind of a movie would this be if it's her? So uh, I would say the critics never really cottoned to William Castle's horror movies. They were kind of beneath them. They'd rather be off reviewing something else.
Interesting. Frank, I want to touch upon just briefly two other films, and one you've already mentioned, Homicidal, which came out in 1961, a horror thriller film. It follows a murderous woman in a small California town whose presence unearths secrets concerning a prominent local family. And I have to admit, I've not seen this one. A, is it worth seeing? And B, how good is it?
It's worth seeing. How good it is a matter of taste. There's some violence in the beginning, then not much else happens for the next hour or so. And at the very end is when the fright break comes, when William Castle comes in. If you're too scared to sit through the rest of this film, please leave. And then it all comes out. This is one ending I don't want to give away, but especially since you haven't seen it. But if Hitchcock took some inspiration from Castle, and in this film, Castle takes some inspiration from Hitchcock, and that's all I'll say about the ending. So
so definitely worth seeing.
Yeah, it's worth seeing if for no other reason is again, I don't want to give it away, but you're getting into something that's very much in the social history, in present culture now. The debate's underway now, so in that sense, it's certainly worth seeing.
You mentioned the fright break. William Castle appears on screen, and he did this in quite a few of the films, and I think he comes across well in front of the camera. Do you think he borrowed that from Hitchcock, or do you think he was influenced by something else?
No, he early on he would be doing his own the trailers, the coming attractions. He would do that himself, and then what was coming attractions actually became prologues in the film. He'd come on screen, and then he'd kind of insert himself in the screen. Homicidal, I don't remember if he comes on screen during the fright break, or I don't think he's on screen during the fright break. It's just a voice, and I don't think it's his voice that comes on and says, you see a clock ticking down. You say, have this many seconds to leave the theater to get your money back. So no, I think he invented that himself. Yeah. If anything, I'd say Hitchcock in Psycho did his own coming attractions for that. He appears in the coming attractions, and that was after Castle did some of his. So Hitchcock might have got that from him. The story is, and I don't know if it's true, is that Hitchcock looked at films by Castle and Roger Corman, which are doing quite well in low budget black and white, and that's where he decided to do Psycho in black and white. And he at least one thing he adopted from Castle was doing his own coming attractions.
Yeah, definitely a connection there. Castle, Corman to Hitchcock. One other film I wanted to ask about, it's not a film that Castle directed, but he was the producer for the 1968 horror classic Rosemary's Baby. He had originally wanted to be the director, but that went to Roman Polanski instead. I'm curious, do you know if as the producer, did he have much creative influence on this film at all?
I think his main job as producer was trying to ride her on Roman Polanski. Because, Castle came up in a world where staying within budget and schedule was not only important, it was paramount. You didn't have the money to go any further. And Rosemary's Baby had the backing of Paramount Studios, and Roman Polanski would want more takes. He'd want to put this in. He'd want to put that in. And Castle was, Castle was basically between him and the studio, trying to keep him on budget and schedule. And for Polanski, that was secondary, whereas the Castle, that was paramount. And if you watch some of Castle's films, you can say, well, there's kind of a disconnect there. And if so, maybe he just didn't have the time or budget to go and make things smooth like that. But Polanski was not to be deferred by that, and deterred by that. And I say thank God, because I think Rosemary's Baby is one of the great horror films. I think it's the greatest horror film in the 1960s, and it's right up there with all the great horror films. So did he have creative input? I would. I don't think much. I don't think it would have been a much different film if Castle had not been the producer. Polanski was in charge.
Oh, wow. I think that was a great movie. It's up there for me as one of my favorite movies. I loved it a lot. I'm kinda curious before we get ready to kinda wrap things up. Can you tell us maybe about some of the projects that you're working on or maybe some special appearances that you're gonna be making upcoming this year, like Monster Bash, maybe a few other things you're working on?
Well, none of my appearances are very special, but
Oh, yes, they are.
no, the only one I have scheduled is uh is Monster Bash, which is June 12th through 14th. That's a horror movie convention,
Mhm.
and I'll be giving a talk on the Saturday the 13th. I'll be there selling my books. I am what
A CD
what CD?
that you're writing.
Oh yeah, no, I'm oh yeah, I've been out of nowhere. I was contacted by Hammer Films to write 3 articles for them for their upcoming periodical they are issuing, and so I've been working on them. I'm writing. I have 8 books. I'm writing a 9th book, and I think that's going to be my last book because, as far as novels are concerned, my bag of tricks is almost empty.
Oh
So
my goodness.
I'm reaching deep in this one, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through.
Mhm.
And just today, in fact, 2 hours before I called in, I worked it out to get the Pope into my book
Wow.
because my book is taking place in Chicago in the late 1960s.
Mhm.
And then it occurred, then I was talking to my wife and she mentioned Pope Leo. And I said, wait a minute, he's from Chicago. And he was 13 years old in Chicago when my book was taking place. So out of nowhere, I'm bringing this 13-year-old kid in. And, how many popes do you know their birth name? You know, there's Pope John, there's Pope Paul, all that. How many do you
Mhm.
know their birth name? Not many. So not many people will catch the reference because he's not Pope Leo yet. He's Robert Prevost. But
Oh,
so a
gosh.
few will get it, and I like to think there's things in my books that are they don't disrupt the book and all that, but there's things in there that's people like Bruce or other. But oh yeah, I get where he got that from. That's a twist that not everybody's going to see, but that's for the chosen few will get that.
Oh, awesome. And do you have an expected release date for your new book?
I always try to target my books for since I've retired. I've been writing a book every 2 years, so I always try to target them for the official release at the Monster Bash. So it'll be, if all goes well, God willing, Monster Bash 2027 will see my 9th book, my 3rd trilogy, and I think that's the end of my novel writing days. So I'll write articles for magazines for as long as they let me.
Oh, wow. Oh, that sounds fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, and but if I have time, what's one more? And you can cut this out if there's not time for it.
There's lots of time.
In William Castle's autobiography, he states that he owes it all to Bela Lugosi. That uh, Castle was in his early teens when Bela Lugosi was on Broadway as Dracula, and Castle, whenever he could, got the $1.10 he needed to get a seat. And he went and saw it, and then he worked up the courage to go backstage. And Lugosi loved having boys about in their early teens come to visit him because that was when, legend goes, he ran away from home and he was on his own since then. So he had a special soft spot for boys in their early teens. And he offered to let Castle come and see the play From the Wings in a Broadway theater, which is a big deal for him, of course.
Mhm.
And he went as often as he could. He'd watch the audience, and he got to understand audience reactions. And he says in his book, I owe it all to Bela Lugosi. He got me started. Then a few years later, Castle was still in his teens. He says he was 15, but I think he was actually 19. But in his teens, he got a call saying, Mr. Lugosi has recommended you as an assistant stage manager on a theater tour and all that. That was his first job in the theater. And Wells says, and I don't know if I believe this 100%. Excuse me, not Wells, Castle. You got to filter out all these Wellses and make them. Castle. Castle says he quit school and went to work in the theater, and he'd been in it ever since. So, and a little nod to Bela Lugosi from William Castle, not Orson Welles.
That is such a cool connection. I had no idea.
Neither did anybody else until Castle wrote his autobiography.
Oh, jeez. Oh, Bruce, you're on mute. Oh, yep.
Okay.
Oh, there he goes. Oh, he's off mute now.
And Frank, your Lugosi book happens to be my favorite of the nonfiction category that you have done. I really enjoyed that one. I've enjoyed all your books, but the Lugosi book, I think, is probably at the top of my list of the 8 that you have done. So, new book coming out in a little more than a year from now, hopefully Monster Bash 2027. You'll be presenting at this year's Monster Bash, June 13th in Pennsylvania, and you'll be doing a talk on the Peter Lorre film, Mad Love, his first American film, and also some new articles coming out with this publication from Hammer Films, which I was not aware of. Frank, we do appreciate the fact that you spent a lot of time with us once again. You're always welcome here. Frank has been nominated for 3 Rondo Awards here in 2026. To recap, Best Classic Monster Fiction for his book Deals with the Devil, Dialogues with Death. Also nominated for Best Event of 2025. That was Murders Double Down, Murders in the Rue Morgue at last year's Monster Bash. He and Greg Mank were there. And Best Article, which really prompted this talk today about William Castle, the article for Scary Monsters magazine, Horror's Greatest Showman, The Fun and Frights of William Castle. If you want to learn more about the Rondos, go to their website. It's rondoaward.com. And certainly you can vote for Frank in any and all of these categories. We have some other folks that we know that have been nominated. We'll be talking about those in upcoming shows. But Frank, as always, we do appreciate your time. It's great catching up with you and look forward to see you in June when the weather is nice and hot.
Yes, and thank you so much for this. I really love coming on your show, and this is one of my favorite podcasts. So thank you so much.
Oh, we appreciate that, Frank. Thanks. Thanks to Frank Dello Stritto, our guest. Thanks, of course, to my co-host and producer, Tracy Asteria. Thank you, Tracy. We thank all of you listeners and viewers. We really appreciate the fact that you decided to join us in this Museum of the Macabre. And we hope we'll see you again next time, right here in the Ghostly Gallery.